Despite the thriving population in southern states, such as Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, or Louisiana, there's even more so a loyalty that it seems unwavering to the Republican Party. So on today's episode, I brought out good friend, political science major, poet, and Mississippi native, Sip, to talk about it with me. So without further ado, here's episode 2 of The Black Vote, the South.
Well, Sip, thank you so much for coming on today. Today we're going to be talking about the Black vote, but specifically the South, which we're both from southern states. I'm from Florida.
Hey.
You're from Mississippi. So I wanted to do a brief, especially with you, I wanted to dive deep into what's going on. There was an interesting tweet that I saw that said that Georgia wasn't the only state that could flip. Georgia wasn't the only state. We have, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, which was really interesting for me to see because I'm from Tampa. So Tampa, Miami, or cities like Tampa, Miami, and St. Pete, you would think would affect, but it didn't. And then the history of those states and how it affected where we stand today. One interesting thing that I do remember, there was a poem that you recited for me, and it was talking about, you said a line that was something like, "You are what your mama is."
Yeah.
And in that, it's how states would flip like terminology. So they would first say, "Oh, we're colored," and then we are Black, and then we're Negro, and then and how switching that also affected us, confused us, made American people fall under Black category. So it definitely changed it, like who we and how we were able to, vote. But yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and dive deep in a little bit of history that we both know and try to figure out what happened. Why
Yeah.
we are red.
Why are we all red in the South?
When
Why are we?
it's really interesting. So with starting with that, Southern, I already have done the history on, Black votes in this series. So I won't really talk about that, like why Black people find themselves voting left, voting Republican, or voting Democratic. My apologies. But also interesting, I find that my family members have aligned with Republican views. Is that something that you see too with yours?
My family does not vote Republican. As far as I know,
No, I
yes,
mean,
it's private.
they
So
have conservative views. Does your family have?
okay, yeah. So my family does have some conservative views, but as far as voting, I have not known any of my close relatives to vote Republican. But if you do listen to some of their chatter, you're just like, are you sure you're not a Republican? Do I need to expose you right now? But you do find that in a lot of the older generation, and I think that is why sometimes you do find people in the Black community that do vote Republican because they want to keep some conservative views because they feel like Democrats today have gone maybe too far left. The radical Democrat.
Yeah, and I'll be talking about that too because I found that more Black people voted for Trump in the midst of everything that's going on. More Black people voted for Trump this go around, this election season versus last election season, and that surprised the hell out of me. I was really confused with everything that was said, with him not denouncing white supremacists, with him not supporting, movements such as Black Lives Matter, any protests that were going on, saying that there were good people on both sides when it came to the white supremacists that came out, and I think that was Virginia. So it was just really interesting to see that was, and more so men. I think it was like 26% or something like that. Don't quote me yet, but it was higher than what it was 4 years ago. And I think that,
Mm-hmm.
us coming from the South, my family, I grew up Pentecostal Christian, so obviously they're going to be, more conservative. Yeah, have more conservative views. I obviously, the reason why Black people don't vote conservative would be, or Republican would be, simple because that party has never had, well, that's not true. The party in this current vernacular, in this current season, it hasn't helped us. It hasn't done
Mm-hmm.
anything for us. It hasn't, because we switched generations ago, but it hasn't done anything for us. And if anything, it's continuously harming us. Like I said, I was watching 13th and seeing how that plot to really break Black families was
Mm-hmm.
was really crazy to me, that it was even admitted on record sometimes. So,
Right.
but not even that. I mean, the 13th Amendment did give us our citizenship, our us being American, but then comes the 19th Amendment, where many feminists hold proud that, uh, women finally got this right to vote, but
Mm-hmm.
really we saw that that wasn't the case for
Yeah.
everyone.
So the amendments are always an interesting conversation when you're talking about the Constitution. It's probably like my favorite kicker to any conversation when people are saying that there's no such thing as racism in America. There's everyone was treated equal for this country, right? And then it's like, okay, well, why were there amendments then if the Constitution was written for everyone? Then you have to explain what the word amendment means, right? So initially, we all didn't have these rights, right? So 13th Amendment was to end slavery or servitude unless it's for punishment of a crime,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, yeah, okay, but also just we have to keep it, but we're not gonna keep it, but we just gonna do what we have to do because this whole war happened. But just know we will continue to do this part, right? So then the 15th Amendment came in 1870, and it allowed Black males to vote, right? Allowed, right? Because all of a sudden, uh, we have these different tests, we have these different taxes, right? And it's as if the South had to get creative on how to restructure their racism, restructure their slavery, right? And that was the beginning form of that. And then the 19th Amendment that you're bringing up was right now women can vote, right? But it didn't allow Black people, because all of a sudden now there's a different set of rules. And those rules are you have to be able to read and interpret the Constitution. And I'm pretty sure back then, and I'm sure right now, there are plenty of people in America that can't even read and interpret the Constitution just by themselves, right? So it seems like an impossible test. We also have these taxes. And if you think about the time period, Black people weren't making a lot of money in general, if they were making money, right? And so the Industrial Revolution is kind of the time frame where a lot more money was getting in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also before then, right? So it's still not really any money being able to pay these absurd taxes, right? And then, of course, you have the abuse that happens at the polls. So the 19th Amendment is always interesting to me because Black women are the ones doing all the footwork, right? They're the ones being rowdy, right? They're the ones being like, no, 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 no. Women have the right to vote. We have the right to vote. We're like, we're people too,
And then
right? And then all of a sudden, white women were like, oh, yeah, that is a good idea. We should have the right to vote. Ah, yes, yes, right? And then it happens, right? All of a sudden, it's passed. And it's a reminder, right, that in America, white women have the audible voices, right? There's no sound for Black women that comes out, right? But then when someone does hear it, it's kind of like, oh, why are you so angry? And it's like, well, she just said exactly what I just said, and y'all thought that was a great idea. I don't understand.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference between Keisha and Karen. Keisha
Yeah.
is the person that did everything. She has been inconvenienced through life. She has been inconvenienced you through her order today. Traffic inconvenienced her, and
Mm-hmm.
and then you really messed up, boo boo. You really messed up, and then so she respectfully lets you know that you messed
Right.
up, and then you get upset. So she gets upset because you disrespected her, and then she goes off
Mm-hmm.
Keisha. Karen just went off. Karen just went
Right.
off of the first, and I think that it's really interesting that in America, especially Black women, maybe I feel this way because I'm a Black woman, but to me, especially Black women, are found to be are taught that it's okay to be inconvenienced and work through that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know why it we still allow it. Like we
Mm-hmm.
with the Me Too movement started by Black women and then being taken over. And then I'm to be honest, when I'm on social media, I see a lot of it's like my voice isn't valid until they say something. So me saying, "Oh yeah, this is how I was treated by a cop," or "Black Lives Matter," well, they don't matter until this white girl posted, has her poster up walking through, the crowd saying, "Yes, Black Lives Matter," and
Right. Yeah.
it's obviously something that has been going on for centuries now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's funny that we still haven't gotten it right.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I feel like we still haven't gotten right is voter suppression with Black people, and it
Mm-hmm.
almost to the point where I'm like, one of my friends challenged me. She said, "Well, we keep saying Democrat and Republican. Why don't we just create our own thing? Why aren't we lobbying for ourselves? These corporations can,
Mm-hmm.
not Jews rightfully have, as an American, have the right to say no, I need America to help out what's going in with my people and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But it's always us that has a hard time coming together, especially now. I have so
Mm-hmm.
many Black friends that are like, yes, I'm pro vote. And then I have other Black friends that are completely in their government majors or political science majors, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't want to vote. Why do you
Yeah.
think, with everything that's going on, why do you think that happens?
With COVID putting a damper on connecting and networking, I had to find a new way to business card. That's why I went with Link. My Link card allows me to share my podcasts, social media, websites, or whatever else about me while still keeping it safe and social distancing. The card's NFC capability allows me to share all of that in just a tap of the phone. And the QR code on the back lands people to a custom page that I've modified for Black Lives Matter or COVID updates. In fact, you can listen to this very episode up on there now. So say goodbye to handing out your old business cards and say hello to Link. And because you're a part of the Speak Free fam, enjoy a 15% off discount by using Poetry Prose at checkout. That's visiting linkapp.com and typing in Poetry Prose. That's LINQAPP.com and typing in POERTYPROSE when you get like me and grab yourself a new way to business card.
Like that's a heavy topic, and I think you brought up three different points that kind of go together, but can be discussed in three different ways, right? So the topic of why can't we all just be on one accord, right? It's not just a new occurrence that has happened with our generation. We're not the hard-headed generation as much as our grandparents or parents may want to point it out to us. But if we do recall Harriet Tubman, she did have to say that not everyone, she can't save everyone, right? That there were like example of her sister that did not want to leave. She wanted to stay, right? That's an example of we can't get on one accord, or You have some people who would go plan, right? They will plan the escape meetings, and then you have the people that have to do protection because they're concerned that someone else that they are alongside is going to go tell, even though they know the repercussions, right? So that's a deep-seated thing that has occurred. But I also would like to reiterate, as a political science major, you understand that it's human nature, no matter race, color, creed, to want to be different, right? It's so people always ask, like, what would the world be like if we had no racism? It'd be a better place. No, because we would find another way to bring someone down, like elitism, right? So there's always going to be a form of separation and unity, right? Even if you look at other cultures, people are like, oh, well, white people stick together. No, there's separation in white people, there's separation in the Latina community, right? It's just we know ours is loud because we're in it, right? We know what we know in our house. We don't know what's going on next door, right? So I feel like that is one reason why. It's not the for sure answer. Now, to go to the conversation of why we don't vote, right? That's the topic. So there's a lot of reasons why, right? And if we go to state or local type of elections, a lot of the reasons why you don't see a lot of voting in Black communities is because if you go through a Black community, you're not going to see signs that say go vote, or it's time to vote for this judge, or it's time to go vote for this senator. If you ask people when it's time to go vote for their local election, they're not going to know, just straight up, right? But it's when they see those signs and they're like, oh, it's time to go vote, right? But you see that in predominantly white neighborhoods. If you ever just take a drive around election time, you can see that. Um, and then you also have the situation of like radio promotions, right? On a lot of radio stations that I listen to, they're not going to have go vote as their commercial. But if I listen to NPR, they're going to say go vote. But if we think culture stereotypically wise, a lot of us aren't listening to NPR to tell us to go vote in our local election. So that's one reason. And if we go on the topic of the national election, why do some people not vote? It's because they feel as if, one, their vote won't matter because a large group of these people are going to go vote for this person, and they feel as if their votes aren't going to matter because they're the only ones voting for this one. That's what they see on social media or the news, etc. Or they just don't understand how electoral college works, right? They don't have that privilege of information to know how the system works, so they just won't go. As far as like people choosing not to vote, I'm all for utilizing your rights, and you not utilizing it is a form of utilizing your right. But people that choose not to, the way I feel is two ways, right? If you don't go vote, I imagine it's because you're an action person. You're like, nope, I'm not going to vote because I want to be a lobbyist. I want to be out in the streets making sure that what we're demanding comes true. Now, if you're someone that doesn't vote and you don't do that, I don't really know how to back you up, but let me know and then I'll try. And the second one, I don't have a problem with some people not voting if they say they're not voting because they don't know what to do, right? So imagine I'm somebody that's like, I'm not going to go vote. And you're like, no, Sip, you're going to go vote. I'm taking you, right? Now you have me in this voters booth, okay? The only names that I know are the national election names, right? Trump and Biden, right? I know I don't want this person, so I'm gonna go vote for this person. But you never explained to me propositions. You never explained to me senators, judges, none of that, right? So I'm either gonna go off of name recognition, or I'm just gonna Christmas tree, right? And name recognition isn't always good because you have all types of campaigns like don't go vote for this person, vote for this person. And if I'm voting for someone, I'm like, oh, that name sounds familiar, but comes to find out like they're pro-life or pro-choice, and you have a side, or say they're against like the Uber and Lyft prop that came out, right? And you're an Uber driver, but you don't know anything, and you choose somebody that's against keeping your job, right? So sometimes it's better if you don't know what's going on and you're just like, I don't have the information or I don't want to go get it. sometimes it's best to just let them be like, okay, cool. Or you could say, hey, do you want this information? And if they say no, then okay, cool. If they do, it's your job to educate, right? There is another point that you brought up in regards to voting. Can you remind me of that?
Yeah, it was on voter suppression, but I guess it went hand in hand with today why I feel like voting, another one reason that I feel like we don't vote today, we as Black people don't vote today, with it being like stripped away from us, from our grandmother and great grandmother and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
In some communities, because I feel in a sense, or at least what I've seen is that in some communities where there was a lot of, either a lot of fear or not a lot of understanding of, you know, a particular topic, the importance on that also wasn't taught. Like for instance,
Mm-hmm.
my great grandmother, she was born 1919.
Mm-hmm.
She could count, she knew her money, she couldn't read at all.
Mm-hmm.
She knew, you know, signs where we lived, what the stop sign meant, which exit to take, 132, you know, whatever it was. But she she would stress the importance on a lot of things like voting, like
Mm-hmm.
going to school and getting your education, because that was something that was taken away from her. But
Mm-hmm.
with there not really being a true understanding, there was a bit of a disconnect. So I also felt like, you know, a lot of the reason why we as, you know, Black people, we were either given, you know, the history that our grandparents would tell us on what happened with them when they were trying to vote, and we get
Mm-hmm.
so angry that it hasn't changed yet that we decide not to vote because we feel like it doesn't matter. Look, it's been 60 years, it still doesn't matter. Or we weren't
Mm-hmm.
given that education,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, or even stress the importance sometimes on, you know,
Yeah.
how important it is to vote. But it, like, I'm not sure if that's a fair if that is a fair argument, because I
Yeah,
feel
I think that's an
like,
argument.
you know, but like their
Yeah.
generation stressed voting, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they went to go vote because they knew it was important, because
Right.
it has to be important if they keep taking it away from us. It has to be important
Yeah.
if they are really trying to make it this hard for us to not vote. We must be some sort of
Right.
powerful if they're
Mm-hmm.
continually, you know, continuously stripping us of this right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't sure if
So
that was
going with that, let's say the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right?
Mhm,
Uh, it increased Southern Black votes by 50%, right?
mhm,
Because it made these literary tests illegal, poll tax illegal, but it was never mandated, like it was never enforced, right? So you could still go to a poll, like for example, Mississippi and Alabama, the longest reigning of all racism I've ever seen, and they're just like, no, we're still going to do it, but it just gave legal right if a state did that, you could take it to the Supreme Court, sue, right? At that point in time, Black voting increased and it was large, right? Because that is what was impactful at that time, right? The Black vote. Uh, Not to say that's not, but the point that I'm trying to bring is that's what was the hot topic back then. That was what was going to do change back then because there were no Black votes in, there were no representatives in, right? So we had to get in, right? So that's why it was so important. That's why our grandparents were like, you gotta go up there and go vote because one, they fought so hard for it, right? And then two, it's because that's what's hot for them. That's like, this is how I got heard. This is how I'm going to continue to get heard. This is what we're doing.
mhm,
So how I describe it now is we're the generation of my granddaddy said you owe him $20 and I'm here to collect it, right? Like we're the ones that's trying to demand like, hey, they said that this needed to be changed and I'm making sure that this is going to be changed. That's our generation. If you look at it, that's what we're doing. We're making sure that if we're going to vote, we have our voters, right? You got our voters. They're going to make sure we're voting in people that's going to be different, right? Like former President Barack Obama, right? 62% of Black votes, that was the highest. And then when we had President Trump run, it went to 57%, which was the lowest Black votes have ever happened in 20 years, right? And so when this came along, we have our voters again. And they're like, we have to put all these different people in. If you look at senators, if you look at the congressmen, if you look at mayors, if you look at judges, we're changing the game. And then you have the people who are like, I'm not going to go vote, but I'm going to go hit the streets, right? So they're the ones being the lobbyists. And a lot of times, people don't get the opportunity to learn how lobbying works, how effective lobbying is. And so I think our generation is definitely like, we're the lobby generation. We're the, all right, this talking thing was cute, but now you need to start giving us what we owe. We want to see the results. And so I think that's why a lot of people aren't voting, because they're kind of tired of that part now. We wanted, we did the voting thing. Now I want to see you do something. So I think that is why a lot of us are always like hitting the streets, you know, let's hit the ground running. And also with that mindset is part of the reason why felon voting has changed so much since August, right? Because we have people that are hitting the streets because we did this whole voting thing, and now we want to see results. And so we're making sure that they do that, hold them accountable. So you have 7 southern states who have changed their felon voting away from you no longer can vote if you are a felon to being you after time served, parole and probation you can. But with that, that still even goes into voter suppression, because there are plenty of people who have parole for life, right? There's plenty of people who are on probation for 20 years who die on probation, right? And they still won't ever get the right to vote in those 7 states because of that. And if you look at the numbers of Black people who are incarcerated, that's still us, right? So that's still suppression. And then you have 4 states who are saying, you know, you can get it back when you're out of prison, but certain felons can't get it. And so it just continues, you know, the different forms of suppression, which is also a reason why you find a lot of people not being able to vote who are Black, because once they get out of prison, they still have probation time to serve or parole time to serve, and they're getting a disproportionate number of years on that time compared to white convicts.
Yeah, it's very interesting to now see, you know, I'm in Washington, but to see states like Oregon like completely decriminalizing, you know, drugs and things like that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
funny. I don't remember if it was Dave Chappelle that said it. I know it was a Black comedian, but the joke was talking about, oh, now that it's not a Black people problem, this crack, you know, epidemic isn't a Black people problem, and it's a white people problem. That's when we're going to say, hey, they're, you know, sick, they are mentally
Mm-hmm.
ill, they are not, it's because they can't get a job, it's because, oh, they're
Yeah.
having a hard time feeding their kids, it's because they're sad, it's because what they're going through, the trauma that they lived through, that's why they decided to do crack and heroin. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because it's not us. And I can't say if back then that would have, I don't I don't know if back then they knew how big of a problem that was going to be, how like detrimental it was going to harm, you know, the Black community, and you know,
Crack, is that what you're saying?
well, crack, and then creating, yeah, and print like
Yeah, no, they knew that
saying,
was the whole purpose, right? The Contras, the radical, you know, right wing, they hired a lot of like ex-pilots, ex-military pilots, and like it's all in government record.
oh
During the
really,
war on,
I didn't know that.
yeah, the war on drugs, yeah, it was definitely, they had a they also have documentaries on Netflix where they're talking about how government officials will come to them, pay them large amounts of money, and have them disseminate crack into Black neighborhoods. And that was just in the 80s. So there's still people alive
Oh
to
yeah,
this day.
I watched a video where a Klansman said that, yeah, they would they would go, to a neighborhood, drop off crack,
Hmm.
drop off guns. Um,
But it just wasn't white people, right? Because a white drug dealer in a black neighborhood, you have to be the feds, right?
no, he would
So they're
drop.
paying off black drug dealers to do all of this as well. So that goes back to the conversation of can't get on one accord, right?
Yeah. And then with that, with felons not being able to, or if it being fair, like we criminalized so many different things that, when you look back on it, weed, having this amount of weed, or having this triple amount of the crack versus, or pardon me, triple amount of the cocaine versus,
Hmm.
crack, and then having a harsher sentence in a longer sentence time.
Hmm.
So it's just really interesting to see, okay, well, this is my father, literally my father, not being able to
Hmm.
vote until this year. This was his first election that he could vote as a felon, because Florida was
Hmm.
able to change that for him. And it was going to
Yeah.
be because of, thing, because he didn't have the same opportunity. You don't get the same opportunity as a black person. Now it's a matter of, well, this is the only job that I am good at and paying the bills with. So
Right.
there's that. But it's not even just voter suppression, because with, felons that you see, it's voter suppression with, oh, we're going to close down this station, or we're going to cause
Hmm.
lines to be way too long for you to, stay there. And then with
Hmm.
Trump literally calling mailed in votes illegal votes. I thought that was really interesting.
Hmm.
All I could think about is, what about all the veterans that are overseas? What about my grandma
Hmm.
that can't, go in? These are people that are white people that you're not counting anymore. These are people that were at risk for COVID. And those people,
Right.
but then again, I looked at his rallies and I did see, that he said, no, you're going to go in no matter what. You're not going to go to
Hmm.
these, early voting stuff. You're not going to do mail-in ballots. You're going to stand in line, catch COVID.
Hmm.
Oh, and it's just so interesting, because what about those people that haven't done that for years now, because they were either
Hmm.
too old, a veteran, or whatever else maybe.
Hmm.
So it's just really interesting to see. It's not just gerrymandering. It's not just, oh, we're going to restrict felons. It's not just oh yeah, we're going to make these lines long that uh harm or hinder, make it harder for black people to vote. And it's been
Hmm.
done for generations now. And
Hmm.
we ask the question of, well, what can we do? How can
Hmm.
we come together? How can we
Hmm.
ensure that this isn't happening in our communities?
Hmm.
What are your
I
thoughts?
think a good way to do that is volunteering. When it comes to election time, it's our time to make sure that our faces are inside of those poll offices, right? Um, and that's for multiple reasons. Uh, just so we know that we're not being slighted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, if there is an office that's promoting and it's like, hey, come out and vote here, and it's a face that looks familiar, right, to ours, we're gonna go, right? That also, I think we have like a different type of care also when it comes to our people, right? So if I go outside and I see someone's grandmother standing in line and we're on hour 3 of this line, I'm going to bring out a chair, right? I'm going to take that extra step and be like, here's a chair, here's some water, let's cool you off type thing. If I'm not allowed to, skip you in line or bring you inside until your turn, right? So that is a way. Also, with having us inside these poll offices, it help eliminates being treated unfairly. So, say you need a provisional ballot, right? And all of a sudden, this person's like, "Oh no, you need to go back and get the state ID." And it's like, "No, I just need a provisional ballot." And they're like, "No, it's just too much work." Well, that's too much work for you, but I showed up. I'm doing my part. You have to do yours now, right? And then you have someone who Is what's like, oh yeah, I have it, right? I have you, right? Because we're here for all of us to vote, right? The person that might be white that's saying, no, I can't give you this provisional ballot doesn't see the sense of urgency, doesn't see how this is a form of discrimination, doesn't see how you're making a situation that has been hard for the last 4 centuries basically be even harder now. So those are different ways that we can definitely impact those poll offices.
And then with seeing like how, for instance, with Georgia flipping, because we have I mean, I lived in Atlanta, so like I was graced by I it's funny because like I think Trevor, the Daily Show with Trevor Noah said, did a poll on what cities were the most welcoming to Black people, and Lord Atlanta
Hmm.
is definitely at the top, and I understand why it is at the top because there is a lot of us. We're there
Yeah.
popping. We make it happen for each other. We
Hmm.
are very welcoming to each other as well. But then you also had like Savannah, Augusta, and so on and so forth. Uh,
Hmm.
you're from Mississippi.
Hmm.
What major cities did you like that you were proud of seeing that did turn out? Because I don't want to, although it did remain red, what were you proud of? Because
Hmm.
living in Texas, I was really proud of Houston. I was really proud of San Antonio, Dallas. We always expect San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, but seeing the turnout being as high as it was compared to 4 years ago, I was still very proud of my generation and people coming out and doing what they needed.
Hmm. I think proud is it's definitely heavy when it comes to Mississippi. I have a lot of pride for Mississippi's Black folks because through and through we sticking it out in there, right? And with that, as far as the national election, I never put my sense of pride in national elections, right? Because I feel like another reason why Black folks don't vote is because you have a two-party system and both candidates are known for passing bills and policies to put us in prison. So they're like, why should I go vote? Because either way it goes, I might be in prison, right? So I never put my pride in there. What usually I put my pride is the local, the state, right? What are we passing within the state? 2012, Mississippi took slavery out of their constitution at that point, right? Really late, but that was their progress. The progress of changing their state flag, right? From the Confederacy through and through to the flag they have now. And so that also was a big change because
Very.
being from Mississippi, they will eat, sleep, and lay with that flag, and it's with everything. It's at the universities, it's at the middle school, high school, elementary schools, it's everywhere. So those are the kind of things that I get proud about when it comes to my state's progress and policies and bills and ensuring that they look out for one another. Mississippi is also one of the leading states in charity uh, because we do look out for each other at the end of the day.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then with that being said, with you being are you millennial or Gen Z, or you don't even try to fit in those
I
categories?
don't even I don't try to fit because nobody knows. If you Google it, it's 1 year. If you look at like some data, it's another set of years. I definitely think I was born in 94. You know, the last set of 90s babies that made sense. That's that's the only thing I know.
Wow. And I feel offended as being born in 95 and remembering the 90s. Thank you. Nevertheless, what are you most proud about with your generation of Black people? I mean, you've hit on it multiple times, but what are
Hmm.
things that you have over the past, year, looking back, what is it that you said, okay, yeah, this COVID thing really sucked, this whole pandemic thing sucked, seeing people
Hmm.
killed was heavy.
Right.
But
Yes,
what
it was.
what was what was something that you can look back on this year and say, yeah, I'm proud of us. I'm really grateful for us.
Yeah. Uh dang, that's a hard one to narrow down. I definitely would have to say the thing that I'm most proud of the people that I grew up with, the generation that I have grown inside of, basically, is the sticking it out, basically being like, these are the things that we were taught, that we have demanded, and now we're going to stick it out to make sure that you deliver it, right? Like, that's what I'm probably the most proud of, is we're looking for the results now, right? um President Barack Obama did a interview with at the Breakfast Club. On this one, it was a different interview, but he was saying, no, it was Breakfast Club. He was saying that he was speaking about today's generation, saying today's generation is all about equality, no matter race, religion, sexuality, gender. They're making sure that everything is like coming, like, hey, everyone should be treated equal. And he said that, them as parents taught us that, right? Taught us that no matter what the person is or where they come from or who they are, you treat them with respect, and, you be kind to them. And he made a statement saying, even if we didn't believe it, our children do. And now they're making sure that we're being held accountable for what we taught them. And I thought that was perfectly put, because that's basically what our generation is doing. Everything that you just said to me, everything that you taught me, I'm making sure it shows up. Even if you didn't believe it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
making sure you're being held accountable at this point to put that together, right? So everybody's saying that we're one team, one country, one nation, everybody's treated equal. Now it's like, bet, say less. We're going to make sure you're being held accountable for it.
And with that, like, with with being proud of, because like I said, this year was really heavy. With being proud, what are things that you want to see that this nation is going to be held accountable, like in, the first 100 days? I'm not sure if you got to see what, Joe and Kamala were saying they were going to do in their first
Mm-hmm.
100 days, but what is something that you want to see that they are held accountable to?
Imprisoning the killers of Breonna Taylor. But then I don't care what else gets done. In the first 100 days, that's what I want to see.
Can I be annoying and say period at the end of that?
That's it. That's all. I don't care what else get done in the 100 days. I want to see that for sure.
Well, Sip, I thank you so much for joining me today on, Poetry, Prose, and Politics. And before you go, you have a little kissy piece that you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely dish that out. All right. Okay, it's called Independence. Riots have always kept this country together. Our independence doctrine confirms what we're willing to do due to a country no longer guaranteeing civil rights. Riot, burn it, war, repeat until independence is found. July 9, 1776, statue of King George III torn down, the oppressor. Mimicked again, July 2020, statue of Stonewall Jackson torn down, the oppressor. White people mad again, trying to redeem their streak, forgetting we're at the top of the repetition. Our civil rights violated again. We riot. We have a civic duty to defend these rights. Burn it. Finding ourselves having to re-explain our rights and relationship to government is war. Guess they don't see the resemblance, don't recognize their own rules. Guess black and brown is only a token, a casualty. Make it seem everything be just fine if we was gone. A land colonized ironically writes that it was to be seen as an asylum for those persecuted. No one is protected on this soil, just words written on paper, acting as a clock reset. Riot, burn it, war. Independence is never found on land designed for oppression.
That was beautiful. Again, Sip, thank you for joining us today on Poetry, Prose, and Politics and speaking your truth. And as always, speak free. While you can listen to Poetry, Prose, and Politics wherever you stream your podcasts, be it Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm does allow you to leave me a message so that you can join in on the conversation. You can also support this podcast with small monthly donations to help sustain future episodes. You can donate as little as 99 cents a month. Just visit anchor.fm/the political poet. That's anchor.fm/THAPOLITICALPOET. Wow, that's a mouthful. And then click support. Lastly, don't forget to follow me. And you can find me on almost all social media platforms at Jamia Zarzuela. And as always, guys, speak free. Until next time, catch you later.